Hello, I'm Sudipto Mondal, and welcome to What's Your ISM. It's a show about political ideologies and theories of change in an increasingly volatile and ever changing world. Now, those of you who follow this show, I'm sure, are aware that what we are focused on is what's vital and not what's viral. The activists, thinkers, authors, lawyers, journalists, and intellectuals we've featured on this show have left me more educated, and I hope that's been your experience too. The show is also built on things I learned through several years as a field reporter. In all these years, I've traveled to different parts of the country and the world to understand people and their political motivations. If you think that my physical and mental labor brings value to your life, if you find yourself educated by this show, please consider compensating the News Minute for the people and infrastructure they've invested in a show like this. You could also directly fund the production of What's Your ISM by paying whatever amount you think is appropriate directly by scanning this QR code. Hello and welcome to yet another episode of What's Your ISM. 1 year ago, we had a guest over here whose interview ended on a note where we said that the next episode with him will start on that note. The note on which we ended Shivasundar is all these problems, so what is the solution? You know? And Shivasundar, as you know, is Karnataka's Marx Baba. Needs no introduction. If you want to know who Shivasundar is, go back and watch that episode. We are going to cut to chase in this episode. Shivasundar.
That's better.
One of the best reactions that came to our previous episode, here is an exact quote. You guys find problem with everyone. Please provide solution.
Yeah.
Right. I want to start, Shivasundar. There's a lot that has happened since we spoke last. The world order has supposedly changed. Many political developments have happened in Tamil Nadu, in central India with the collapse of the Maoist party, the emergence of the cockroach Janta party and these kind of phenomena. There are many very game-changing things that have happened in the last year. So in all of this, often during these changes, I felt two things. One, from time to time, this groundswell of people's voices coming to the fore is one standout feature of the last 1 year in different parts of the country, down to the fact that in the World Cup also today it's become a political stage in America. You see the fans, the way they are using that international platform to make a statement. A lot of vocal politics we have seen. But this chaos, some would also argue, chaos is a great time for new political experiments, right? And the new political experiments that we have seen, I don't know if they inspire confidence or not, so these are the things I want to get into. So the conditions are quite chaotic. So is that in itself a reason for some hope maybe? Because a new kind of politics may emerge now?
Of course, I think every generation and every era will have its own solutions. And some solutions would be extensions of the previous era. But definitely there will be a rupture and definitely there will be continuity also. Both will go together. And as you actually showed many examples of last few years, I think you can trace it to 2001 also. What happened in Argentina, the whole of Latin America. Then you see the revolutions in the Gulf. For example, this Tunisia, this Libya and those things. Then you come and you have this our own Indian experiment of how the desperation with UPA resulted in a very bad thing anyway. That was not a solution. But there was a kind of resentment of the people that exhibited in its own way. Then of course, in the last few years, you have all the neighboring countries, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, everywhere. And of course, Gen Z revolutions in Nepal. As you suggested, even the Cockroach Janta Party and also to a bit even the developments in Tamil Nadu are a kind of Gen Z response in Indian era, in the Indian time and place. I think every period will come up with its own solutions, which will not be sufficient, which you have to take on from there with historical experiences blended into that. You have rebellions. All rebellions need not be revolutions. Rebellions are just a kind of, it could be instantaneous or it can be over a period of time, it could be a response, a strategic response also. But unless you have a some kind of structural understanding of what kind of solutions you want, what is the problem, you have to identify what is the problem. Some kind of identification of the problems would be very ephemeral. You could see only in the symptoms. Most of the experiments, actually, according to me, some of them would only ended up in finding the solution to the symptoms. There are some structural problems. For example, the democratic problems in Libya or Tunisia, for that matter, it was not actually embodied in the rulers. It was very structural, socio-political, economic, and cultural. It was a systemic crisis. And none of the many movements which came up actually did not attend that problem. Of course, that is also one kind of response. But if we should not get disillusioned, because it will go back to the same old era. In fact, Bangladesh, what structural change, what basic alternative it did offer, what Sri Lanka, I mean, structurally it is better than Bangladesh, but any structural change did it offer? What happened in Libya, Tunisia? Nevertheless, that was a rebellion. Nevertheless, that was a kind of response to that particular crisis. I think history actually goes on like that, and we have to learn lessons and see that these things will actually blend into a kind of new solutions. These are very hopeful.
But the examples that you gave about, I mean, particularly if you look at Libya and Tunisia, those examples, in a sense, are part of a larger trend. It's almost a blur in which you see a certain overarching Western dominance playing a very important role in the shaping of these things. But that aspect has actually changed. That's why I said that a lot has changed between the last time when we spoke. In just 1 year, right? Let's look at the emergence of the China, Russia, this kind of a bloc and this talk of the multipolar world. A couple of years ago, a year and a half, or even 2 years ago, it was still one of those things that you only discussed conceptually. Suddenly we are there. Right now, as we speak, there is a negotiation happening, which is clear evidence of the fact that there's been a shift in the power balance between Iran and the US. And on both sides, the big powers of the world are aligned on either side and all of these things. This presents, do you think, a new kind of political opportunity in the world? What kind of... See, because why do I ask this? Because this is also coincided with this America going inwards, pulling out of world affairs in terms of, their military is one part of their project. The other project is this entire US aid, which is tied into the United Nations, and which is tied into all kinds of development programs. To me, I get a perverse pleasure, honestly, seeing all these international NGO people in our cities, suffering for jobs, honestly, right? We've seen what these foundations and these bodies do. They come literally into movements to de-radicalize them, to put them on a drip serve. These Ford foundations, these other foundations, right? They come over here, they start these international NGOs, Amnesty, any number of them. I mean, they may have some problems in terms of, I mean, we may agree with them to the extent that, yes, we don't want the government clamping down on them, but we know their whole model. So to that extent, you're like little, saying that, but then what takes the place of that? These are questions that are coming to my mind. Tell me.
The second part is very important. How you ended that your question. What takes place?
Yeah.
This is going to decline. In fact, how empires actually decline or collapse is a very important thing to study actually. You have seen many empires over a period of actually millennium. Many empires came up and it collapsed. And it collapsed because of its own arrogance, and it thought that it is invincible, and it was never actually, no empire without actually dominating, hegemonizing, exploiting, no empire can sustain. And that dominance, hegemony cannot sustain when it is based on exploitation. So that is the simple truth of the history. And that happened to even America. In fact, prior to America, you had British Empire, British imperialism as such. And America came with lot of actually hopes and actually many assurances to the world saying that we are not Britain. We actually promote democracy, etc. That was a new different kind of imperialism. People also call it a new imperialism thing. In empires and colonial period, you had physical army going and geographically occupying your colonies. Now you don't need that. You need some dalals actually working on behalf of you. Dalal, right from politics to society, culture, everywhere you will have some dalals who will be arguing on behalf of the colonial project, which will be hegemonic project also. Then without actually being physically present, you can exploit the territories, you can exploit the resources. That's what America did to the whole world. And of course, as you rightly said, they had their CIA arm also, which actually intervened in universities, in all the cultural institutions to actually promote and to identify the people who would be anti-Americans or anti-imperialist and to kill them. There is
To liberalize them.
Yeah, I mean, one is liberalize them. If they don't hit, actually physically kill them. In fact, there is a recorded history of at least 83 military interventions in the democratic world by the US in different ways, indirectly or directly by CIA, toppling the governments, killing the leaders. If you take Iran itself, Mossadegh was such a great leader. The nationalization and socialism was the post-Second World War project for the whole world, especially the African continent, Latin American continent, and also the whole Asian continent. The poor countries actually embarked on these two agendas. One is nationalization of the resources and equitable redistribution. Sometimes, some places it took the form of socialism. Sometimes, some places it took only equitable distribution to the extent possible. But then what Americans did, in fact, as I said, there were some 83 instances of people where in Latin America it was a backyard. They killed the leaders. They actually promoted some insurgencies, counter-insurgencies, and there are many examples.
But in South Asia, if we stick to the South Asian example, in all of these countries in our neighborhood, including our own, one of the ways in which they've entered is this NGOization. Bangladesh, they turned into, the whole governance model turned into NGOs.
Post-80s. I am still in the 50s.
Oh, right, okay.
So if you say even in the 50s, if you stick on to only South Asia and to stick to India, what are the ways in which actually they perpetuated a colonial control? For example, the whole Indian agriculture, post-independent Indian agriculture became a colony of US. The whole Ford Foundation, that was a direct, there was no indirect thing. The whole concept of green revolution, of course, it actually catered to the immediate need of scarcity, but it was a long-time strategic colonization of the knowledge systems, actually perpetuating and regenerating the old order especially. It came out with new classes, but new classes with the same old kind of hegemony and exploitation. So that was direct in that way. But of course, it had the pretension of some socialist rhetorics and some kind of, say, independence, non-aligned movement, etc. But I don't think we were never actually aligned towards justice in the whole of our 77 years. Of course, now it is very, very blatant and very, very self-deceptive. But then also it was not much big way. Some other countries had that. In fact, Egypt, Nasir, Sadat, they actually took on the imperialism in their own way, but finally they also had to actually succumb. Suharto, Indonesia, for example. So there were some great examples. Ho Chi Minh in Vietnam. These people from the grassroots, they actually took on the imperialist order militarily, socially, and economically. But right from the very beginning, we didn't have a economic nationalization program in our independence, in the project of independence. Economic independence was not there. We resigned to the fact that we should be dependent on the imperialist capital. And without that, we cannot grow. Right from 1952, that's how our Indian agriculture became a colony. What about industry? We have that so-called very confusing Bombay plan and all the Nehru-Mahalanobis model, or you say PPP model. So that actually private and public going together. So there was no nationalization. There was no social redistribution of the industrial resources. Private capital was weak. That's why the public capital would help them to grow. So this was the kind of capitalist growth project. Someone calls it like barking socialism and biting capitalism. That was the kind of project we had even during Indira Gandhi, even during emergency, everything. But post-liberalization, of course, now it has got a legitimacy. Now, whatever the word NGO was a kind of abuse when, say, the left was actually strong and anti-colonial current was strong. Now, NGO is not an abuse. Now it has become.
No, where do they go now is what I'm wondering.
Now,
boy, where do they go? I think two classes worst affected by this whole Trumpism is one is this international NGO class of people, so-called development sector. I don't understand what is the development sector, right? It is a certain kind of politics, but then you turn it into a certain process. And then, of course, these ideal minorities, the elites of the South Asian diaspora, which is settled in the US, who's now facing this kind of xenophobia and a certain job insecurity, all of that. It is interesting to see what will happen to them, right? This is a fairly vocal, influential section.
In 2005, it was actually estimated that the budget of the social sector, NGO sector, was around 15,000 crores. It was in 2007. That is a paltry sum if you compare that to today. But then it is not just the reflection of Trumpism. It was even before Trumpism, they called India as a middle income country and no need of economic support for the poor section there. The Indian capital can take care of them. That was the understanding, and that's why this corporate social responsibility during Manmohan Singh came up actually to substitute that. And the whole corporate social responsibility also is to the tune of 60,000 crore rupees. Of course, it serves its own interest. It does not come in a big way like the foreign funds used to come. But nevertheless, Tatas and these kind of big Ajim Premji, these people think they fund. Because as you said, depoliticization is a very, very required kind of social arena in which they can operate. They should actually depoliticize. That's why this new word, no, what is globalization? Why can't you say it is a capitalist growth? The word capitalism has
Because
become
it comes riding on culture also, right? And culture is a very big part of the American export business, right?
Two kinds of things. For example, the Machiavellian kind of hegemony that they want to establish, that you don't know, that we know everything. But on the contrary, what is the other threat? In the name of Indianization, you have Brahminization during the Hindutva regime. They also talk about decolonization. What is their decolonization? It is re-Brahminization, essentially. That is another problem. And for re-Brahminization, they would also get funds, NGO funds and also other international funds also they would get. But of course, not to the extent that they were getting in the previous days. NGO is a phenomena. NGOization is a phenomena of depoliticization, which is a very important threat to very concrete, really a politics which would be emancipatory, which would raise very structural questions at political, societal and cultural level. That's a problem. But then these things cannot go for a long time. Whenever there is an internal crisis, all the crises that we actually talked a few minutes before, right from 2000, Argentina crisis, for example, they actually said in Argentina in 2001, they said that you cannot actually withdraw your funds. So that was the crisis the Argentina was facing. Even the deposits that you made were not be allowed to withdraw because they had to pay the IMF loans. That created a lot of crisis. That ended up in only changing the president, not the IMF conditionalities. That has been the story of the all Latin American countries. And coming to the even Asia also, even Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka, the whole crisis actually came from 2-3 things. One of the IMF conditionalities, which actually collapsed their whole economy. Other thing was the very absurd kind of agricultural experiments the earlier regime wanted to do, which created another agrarian crisis. Of course, that was actually turned into militant movement. Now we know that the whole spy leader, who the official, what to say, director or whatever in their counter spy administration, he was the one who actually bombed the church. He is arrested now. I forget his name. So these things they actually operated. So to put it in a nutshell, the point that you asked, this is a crisis. There's a whole crisis. There is an international crisis. The crisis as reflected in the war on Iran by America and Israel. And it also actually reflects how Iran is sustaining itself. We can have a lot of questions with the internal arrangements of the Iranian society, but then it is sustaining. And if Iran actually wins with flying colors, that would give a boost to all kind of poor countries in the world, that they can actually take on America. And what is America?
That is what I was getting at. Yeah. So that's actually now if that, because now what kind of opportunities does arise out of this new reality is what I was getting at. There's a space in terms of this global influencer, this global police, moral police, all of that, which the US may have withdrawn from. So you don't see a China filling that space.
Yeah. They will not.
They're not going to be the global police.
They have a different notion of how to manage their own economy and the international order. We can talk about that.
Yes, talk about that. So how do you see global order from now on? Because the US has played a very important role in this global order, whatever it may be, disorder or order. With its withdrawal, do you see other countries now? You said that Iran might inspire other countries. Like whom?
Yeah. See, Pax Americana is collapsing in all its kind of, in its politics, in its in economy. What is the economy of the American hegemony? It is basically promoting the private capital and American interest and building clientele in every way and building strategic military alliances with the whole world. First of all, the very NATO was to say that they want to actually reconstruct the European countries, which was devastated by the Second World Order, and they became a kind of satellites around American hegemony. Then they wanted to expand that NATO allies. They wanted to have an alliance with South American allies and also the dictatorial regimes, and also in the Middle East they wanted to have that the whole Saudi Arabia, the Bahrain, Kuwait, Qatar. These are new countries, they are not even countries. They are
GCC
satellites.
countries.
The whole GCC thing is an artificial product of American hegemony. They wanted to actually base their military bases there so that they thought that they can help them. So that's why they even this GCC thought America would help them. Now they have 800 bases, whole of world, the biggest one. That's why they have to spend more. That is why when they are spending more, there is a kind of it is a funny thing to actually know that when China was opening its economy, most of the European countries did not want China to be part of WTO. Who supported? America supported China to become part of WTO. And since China had a very strong industrial base and very strong labor base and with the authoritarian, though communism, it had its own authoritarian rules, so that there will be rules and regime of rules and regulation, cheap labor and vast resources. They thought this is the time to actually exploit China, use this opportunity. Many industries, manufacturing industries were shifted to China. That's how China grew. And meanwhile, whatever resources, whatever surplus they got from that, America invested on expanding its bases. It so happened now, China's economy is now $32 trillion and America's $40 trillion within a span of 25 years. Growth of China is gigantic and America cannot stop it. Because if they stop it, they will collapse. Because America is completely dependent. When I say America is dependent, it is not just America. The whole clientele empire of America is completely dependent. Say, for example, India. If we stop actually importing from China, because in that Galvan thing, we thought that we'll ban TikTok. If you ban everything, you don't get even a simple medicine for your immediate necessity. 90% of our medicinal requirements are from China. Many electronic, satellite, everything is from China. So they have become factory of the world. So this growth, and later part of that, when Xi Jinping became the president in 2013, he largely invested even expanding their military into the three other sectors. Earlier, conventionally, we have army, navy, and air force. Now the wars are not fought on that. Even not a single soldier has been put his foot on the Iran now. It is happening in the space, electronics, and digital warfare. China is so ahead of America. America is afraid of that. One example, if I have to cite, recently Trump visited China. You could see the body language of Trump, how he behaved as a second grade leader of a second grade country, pleading before Xi Jinping. That is because if China actually decide on something, it is difficult for America or its prowess to actually take on China. It is said that in last September, they actually come up with what is they called as New People's Army Day. That is the new army of their structure. Even during the revolution, on September 13th or so, they had a rally for 5 days. There was a big rally. There were 10,000 robotic soldiers marching on the thing, and they are in the 10G era. We are in 5G. They are 10G, and it's far ahead. And in fact, even Operation Sindoor, it is said that Rafale aircrafts were actually, they fell down only because, not because of prowess of Pakistan, because Pakistan was helped by China, and even the ultrasonic technology was deceived by the technology that Pakistan used that was supplied by China, and we lost 5 Rafales. And if that had continued, India would have collapsed. So that is the expansion. And now China has another big project called Belt and Road Project. Right from the East China to the West Europe, they want to connect the old Silk Road, new Silk Road, digital Silk Road, and the whole, what is that called, emerald, that a kind of garland, garland of, that means that ports, The whole world has become part of it. Earlier, when China wanted to become part of WTO, out of 44 African countries, only 4 supported. Now, in 40 African countries, they have their investment. So it is the way that they build empire. It is through mutual development, and they won't come to your, they won't actually hegemonize.
Is that what we should, I was actually, you got good. This is like, we'll take a second here to reflect on this. So these are all the achievements of a nation, of a civilization, and of a certain interpretation of the ideology also.
No, there is another thing which I want to actually, that is the way generally it is understood.
Yeah.
But then now all economists actually analyze how did China do it. Because in 1990, the GDP of China and GDP of India was same.
Right.
And both the countries actually exposed to the world market after 1990. Why that China actually became a gigantic country? Because in population wise, they are the one, now we were number 2, now we are number 1. That's a different thing. But how did it happen? It is because of the strong social base of human investment they made, basic social relations that was changed due to revolution that happened in 19. We became independent quote unquote in 1947. They had their revolution in 1949. What kind of revolution? Complete collapse of feudalism. Complete socialistic kind of development model. There was a share. There was investment in human capital. They didn't actually build big roads. They invested on education, health, and those sectors. By 1990, when Deng Xiaoping came and he wanted to become a market leader, whatever was required was ready. In India, we actually did not nationalize anything. In fact, China nationalized everything. There was nothing actually big as compared to India, but whatever resources they had, they built their strong home market to the needs of the people. Home market was so gigantic, it helped the whole economy to grow. We didn't build our home market. We were always dependent because we had our own comprador capitalists, dalal capitalists who wanted to completely actually prey on the imperialist investments, and just they want to actually, even today, what is Nirmala Sitharaman's gross? She actually gives PLI, production linkage, production linked incentives, etc. And they give, even this, the corporate income tax was reduced from 40 to 23%. Even after that, private sector is refusing to invest. Why? Because they see there is no much gain in investing. They want to go out of the country. More than 15 lakh people have actually surrendered their Indian citizenship and have gone outside country. Because here there is no home market. There is no growth potential. The pure economics. By 1990, China has built a strong home market with developing its own Chinese kind of, they call it Chinese capitalism with Chinese socialism with Chinese characteristics, whatever it means. But then that is the sum and substance of what is growth like. Then onwards, when it opened, of course, in the beginning, now also it remains to be it is called itself as a communist country. India is a democratic country. India was invited. China was not invited. And America helped them to get onto the world market. That grew. In fact, the whole concept of what is this, export processing zones, special economic zones, it stems from India, from China.
Yeah.
By 2000, we wanted to copy them. They had their own special economic zones. They are actually sweat factories. It is not that.
That's what I wanted to ask you. So you talked about the education of the workers and this class coming out of poverty and all of that. In all of that, there was a lot of crushing of the labor
Very
force.
Much. 89, the great crushing of the student movement, not only student movement. In the Tiananmen Square, lakhs and lakhs of workers came in support of students. See, this is an authoritarian capitalist regime with some socialistic rhetorics and some non-capitalistic kind of some measures.
And this socialist state with what Chinese features? No?
Socialism with Chinese characteristics
is a mix of Confucianism and Han nationalism. Right, in which you are talking about Confucius being this person who gives a very pragmatic set of governing principles to keep people in check and in order.
Yeah, socially and culturally. Classical economically, it is a pure classical capitalist opportunism. Like what was the slogan of Deng Xiaoping in 1989? In 79, for that matter. He said, whether cat is black or white, I don't
Yeah.
run unless it catches the mice. That is the typical classical capitalist opportunism. It doesn't have any socialist goal, any control. They control the private capital. That is the difference between the
No, they
capitalist
control the private capital in the sense, I think it was Deng Xiaoping's time only, wherein the capitalists were included in the party itself, in
Exactly.
the party structure.
Nevertheless, say
Yeah.
for example, Alibaba, all of a sudden Alibaba will not be seen anywhere. That they have authoritarian control. If you actually
Yeah, no, one of the admirable things, if at all, is that the government comes on top of capital, and not capital comes on top of government. That is an
they
important.
themselves are capitalist. Deng Xiaoping, all these people are there. If you say, take for example Gini coefficient,
But you'll never have an Elon Musk there, no?
they will have that cannot actually grow beyond the dictates of the party. They want Elon Musk. They want number of Elon Musk to control the whole world, but under the control of the Communist Party. Quote unquote.
So why should we be excited, Shivasundar? I mean, there's a lot of admiration in the fourth world, in the third world. There's a lot of excitement about the new world order, about how, it's almost like between two giants, the one who has exploited us the most. We are excited at the downfall of that.
That is only because when BJP is defeated, suppose in the 2029 election by Congress, people will be happy because BJP is the immediate threat, and it is a threat which people see that it is impossible to actually sustain. For example, Congress came to power in 2023. Whole marginalized sections people actually voted in the fond belief that they will be actually relieved, relaxed, and everything. But then that particular juncture, they wanted a relief. America has been an impossible hegemon of the world, and it is controlling every country in such a way that they don't have an option to actually relieve themselves from. That option came in the form of China. Earlier, we had two blocks. There was Cold War. You had Russia and you had America. Russia used to help in the way that America used. Now China is doing through the helping their public sector to grow, helping their some core sector to grow, and through that some cooperation, and by that hegemonizing them also.
But USSR is also a more interventionist kind of a entity where globally.
Exactly. See, there is a dynamic.
So you think China will emerge as something like that one day?
It is already. In fact, it is. See, Belt and Road project today, if you compare with America, I can list lot of non-interventionist or non-hegemon kind of intervention that China is doing. But what will be the net result of this? What will be the net project of China? Project of China is to increase Chinese investment and increase Chinese profit, essentially. Earlier, even used to have Communist International, for example. Their revolution in one country used to be a base for revolutions in other countries. You have to expand socialist revolutions. That was because unless you have socialism in the whole world, you cannot have socialism even in a single country. That was the understanding. First, it was changed by Stalin saying that socialism in one country. That socialism was converted into kind of nationalism, which narrow nationalistic thing. You can say many things about China during Mao period only. For example, you had this great 5 nuclear powers. How could China actually sign to that project which make other countries not to have nuclear power where you have, where America has, where Russia has? There is one criticism. And wherever there was a rebellion, in fact, even when there was a JVP rebellion, that Sri Lankan party now ruling, there was this where Perumana was the leader. In fact, Mao Zedong helped the Sirimao Bandaranaike regime to suppress JVP with the nationalist interest, because then there was a threat of Russia and America and they want to actually safeguard themselves. It has China also has helped Yahya Khan. China also has helped the regime then in Pakistan to suppress the Bangladesh rebellion for the liberation. It became very nationalistic even before it became a global power. Now, they don't want to intervene in a militaristic way as America is doing, because they are also learning lesson. They are actually proposing a different kind of global security order where it will be mutually beneficial. And another important thing that is very suggesting and very seductive is that why is America hegemon? Because of the dollar. Post 70s, They made dollar as a default international currency. That's why even though America is number one in the debt economy, it will not collapse because the whole world want this dollar to remain and America to remain. Now, for the first time, yesterday, Russia has actually told to the whole world that now onwards we will actually trade the oil with the European world only in ruble and yuan. We will not take dollar. If this happens, if slowly the whole world refuses to trade in dollar, American economy will collapse like speed carts, because the whole American economy is based on debt. That international debt is sailing through only because of this hegemony of dollar. Now China is challenging that. Now, for example, Iran is third biggest oil producer.
But I wanted to pause over there. That's at once an exciting but a very, very scary prospect also. Because exciting, why? Because you see the Goliath floundering and falling to the ground. So any democracy loving person would love to see Uncle Sam be humbled and all that. But it also translates, because of our economy being so closely connected to them, it literally will mean suicides in places like Bangalore and Hyderabad and Gurgaon and Noida. You'll have people jumping out of buildings, Shivasundar. So the debt economy that we are also...
Of course. Yeah. So that debt economy was induced on Indian neoliberal economy. Why? Because we followed completely the Washington consensus or the Chicago consensus, whatever it is. This consensus was built on complete privatization, withdrawal of state, and complete withdrawal of state, essentially, and completely privatizing the public resources. That is the neoliberal consensus. At least now, China is not proposing that. No, it will not continue forever. Let us be very clear about that. Russia did not remain as a socialist country. We have to learn lessons. That's why I always give this example of Congress and BJP in Indian context. We have to defeat BJP, and Congress is not the solution. Congress is equal to BJP, but Congress is not the solution to BJP. That clarity we should have. America definitely is the immediate problem, principal problem. But Chinese model of exercising the hegemony, or the China-Russian model of alternate social order, will not be a conducive or sustaining international social order. That will actually emerge in a kind of equal participation, mutual, that Panchashila, that actually was the kind of goals that we used to have those days. But that is possible when only there is a kind of completely a United Nations of real equality. Now we have a United Nations of America, completely. So a kind of different order. That is possible, not through our wishes, when only each country can assert itself against the hegemony. That is a long way to go. But then we have to learn from the 77 years of our experience, international experience. Coming back to China, now this China is proposing 4 or 5 things. Global security regime, global economic regime, global civilizational regime. So all these things actually is very seducing. Belt and Road project, if you compare that with the kind of pact that India has with the America, this Indo-US trade pact, it is qualitatively different for the present. Let us have that always that caution. So when you have to have an option, the tragedy of Indian people is that we are actually acting on behalf of United Nations in this region. You have a border with China. And recently, if you remember, that Indo-Pacific Command has been changed as only Pacific Command. What is the meaning of that? When Trump came to power, he changed the nomenclature because he wanted to give India a position in Pacific. Indo-Pacific Command, we have a joint allies in this safeguarding this thing, because they had this quad with Australia, Japan, and Philippines and India. They had that quad, and they didn't want India to take important role in BRICS, which was actually developing against J7, etc. And whenever they used to have a discussion about the Asian economy, India was opposing the one particular nomenclature, saying that you should always use multipolar Asia. You should not use superpower Asia, because they wanted to suggest that China and Asia and India are two superpowers in Asia. But recently, Trump said we are planning to have a G2 summit, not G7. Who are the G2? Grade 2? China and America. Not only G2 in Asia, in the world. So he has betrayed Mr. Narendra Modi and his regime in so many ways. Backstabbed, directly stabbed. Still, we want to actually latch our ship only with America. We have such a kind of projects, strategic military projects with America, that even if you want to wish away from them, you cannot, because your whole navy, your whole air force.
That is why I'm
tied
saying
with
that,
them.
are we going down with them?
We are completely. In fact, at least now you have a choice. Now you're not at collapsed. Still, America, the collapse will not be a one-day event.
No, but the collapse is quite sharp in terms of, if you look at the job market now. That typical crowd, no, that IT engineer, that Sarjapur crowd is feeling very, very insecure about the.
That is not immediately the function of war or the collapse of just America. It is the collapse of capitalist economy. Collapse of capitalist
Globally.
economy in the global economy. Global capitalism is collapsing because it is based on these bubbles. If you have a strong home market in each and every country, see what is the percentage of the service sector in the whole global economy in every nation? It is more than 60 to 70%. Whereas the manufacturing is 20% and the primary sector is only 10 to 15%. You cannot sustain a kind of economy, global economy on that scale, And international trade is completely a kind of the speculative capital, for example. So this is the architecture of the international capitalism that is collapsing. That has to change, and some kind of corrections will happen then and there, because you have to actually survive. Every 10 years they will find new era. For example, since 1970, international global economy is perpetually under general crisis. They call it general crisis. Every 10 years, they will find some kind of bubble to actually latch on. For example, you had that dot-com economy. You had that 2007 crisis. What is that? That mortgage crisis. Then you had
subprime crisis.
Subprime crisis. Every 10 years, and now you have this giants of this Facebook, this Google, and digital economy. Now that is the new world. Then after that you will have, what is that, bioeconomy, on which the whole world will trade on. 40% of the international traded goods will be on bio factors. So they want to actually postpone the crisis, finding the new things. It is an artificial postponement at the general crisis. But then this architecture is bound to collapse. Which are actually withdrawing? It is because this Amazon, for example, Accenture, these are the bubbles, These are not actually producing things. The service sector were actually given to outsourced, and they were actually charged in such a high prices. And even if you give in dollars, in rupee, it would be 80 times more than each dollar. So that would actually sustain them. Now that AI has come, artificial intelligence has come. Artificial intelligence is a product of a typical type of capitalist growth that we actually embarked upon in the post 2000 era. We want to actually reduce the human labor so that the profit component, the variable component, will be more. When you want to that is not just American thing. It is Europe, even for example China. It is the complete global economic model that we are actually pursuing. This is bound to collapse now, because, as you have rightly suggested, why our software people are so afraid of, you have this credit market. They would be seduced to actually buy 3 times more than their income, and immediately they are out of the job. They are bound to commit suicide, because they cannot even actually give the monthly whatever thing they have to give, because 3 times their income, they will seduce that. This bubble economy is part of the international global architecture. That is actually aggravated because of the crisis in the Gulf, because of the American-Israel, because oil crisis, inflation. Because of inflation, there is no growth of demand in the international global economy. Since there is no growth in the international global economy, export-oriented growth is actually completely declining. When there is 30% of our Indian economy is based on exports. When you don't have export, definitely, as you said, not only service sector, much of the agricultural crops are going. Now you have triple type of shocks. Now you don't have that export market. You don't have actually urea and other kind of menus because of the Iranian crisis. Third, you have inflation. So all these 3 crises. This crisis can be mitigated at least after if the war comes to a pass. Yeah. But the structural crisis, which was even existing before that, will continue unless the architecture changes. That architecture will change either inwardly or outwardly, either through implosion or through explosion. We are heading towards that.
And in some ways, one would say that this is the kind of collapse which would lead to the politicization of the masses, so to speak. These are the kind of conditions in the past we have seen economic crises leading to revolutions.
I have a guide. I have a rider on that.
Okay. I was trying to lead to somewhere, but anyway, what's the rider?
The rider is only that every crisis is a danger and also an opportunity. In fact, during the Second World War, the kind of crisis Germany had should have generated revolution, but it produced a fascist. It produced an Hitler. And not just in Germany.
In Italy and in Spain.
Not even just Italy. 50 countries of the world were at the threshold of fascist rule. Right. Some fascist counter-revolution collapsed because of so many other things. Because this economy, when it actually is not led with a vision, hope, and structural change, that subjective factor, which will lead this crisis to from danger to solution. If that is absent, for example, in Germany, what happened? That option was completely decapitated and decimated. Communists were killed on the streets. Socialists were killed on the streets.
And also now that we are seeing a certain kind of, I won't call it socialist, but it has certain socialist features. It is protectionism, it is xenophobia, and has some white socialism, if at all. In different parts of Europe, if you're seeing a certain in Spain, in France, in Germany, you're seeing the emergence, even in the UK with Stammer's emergence and all that, you're talking about a certain white socialism, if at all.
Last time we talked about Stammer, how his politics is very
he's
dubious, and that's what actually resulted. See, Brexit is not a socialist project.
Of course,
Brexit is very much xenophobic, capitalist xenophobic, because the capitalist class in Britain were actually threatened by the onslaught of the European hegemons. So they wanted to protect them. So they didn't want to protect the labor class of the Britain. They wanted to loot them, and they did not want it to be guided by the European human rights rules also. So every protectionism need not be socialistic.
Of course, and that is, in fact, I use that as an example to connect back to exactly the kind of things you pointed to, which is that 50 countries were flirting with fascism in the time of Hitler, Mussolini, and that I suppose is a feature of today's mobilizations as well, against certain features of this capitalist order. But they are not exactly anti-capitalist or anti-imperialist things. And in India also, so therefore you're saying, by import, you're saying that in India, this kind of an economic collapse will not lead to any kind of
necessarily
left, because already you have such an attractive thing in Jai Shri Ram.
Jai Shri Ram is one thing. Other thing, as you pointed out rightly in the beginning, NGOization is there, still in a big way. Depoliticization is happening. Identity politics are actually playing their own game. Identity politics will be very, very highly democratic, will have highly democratic potential provided it actually blend with the democratic aspirations. Assertion with redistribution. Identity with actually redistribution and the larger solidarity. That would actually result in different. These kind of identity projects can be easily co-opted into larger domain of the rightist discourse. Then you have people are actually not very, very excited because of Cockroach Party is because we have the just 10-year-old experience of Anna Hazare and Aam Aadmi, because if you look at the history of fascism has defeated the earlier regimes, which were either conservative or liberal or left of the center, basing on the corruptive practices. Whenever there is an anti-corruption movement, that rings a wrong bell in the history. Whether it was during Jaiprakash Narayan and all this, everywhere. In fact, there is How Fascism Grow is one particular book. I forgot the name of the author. He actually lists how in all these 50 countries, how it actually paved the way. The question is, Hitler is a dictator. Hitler is cruel. His SS and our other armies were cruel. But why then Germans were silent? 4 crore Germans were silent. Why? Because fascism is a long-run project. It is fascicization of the society. We start from the very beginning because of the total hopelessness. Because those regimes who gave lot of assurances will not deliver. There will be a complete kind of resentment. And then you have what Griffin says as he calls it as palangetic ultranationalism. What is palangetic? Palangetic is we had such a great glory in the past that has collapsed. Through ultranationalism, we will actually regenerate that glory. Fascism actually did that in Germany and everywhere. Even Modi is doing that. We had such a glory. Muslims actually did away with that. Now we have to resurrect the glory. This will appeal for the people who are in the crisis. I will give you another analogy. You talked about NEET. IMF and ILO talks about another NEET. What is this NEET? This is the group of youth aging between 20 and 29. This NEET says not in education, not in employment, not in training. That is NEET. This is actual classification of a class of people who are oppressed, who are deceived of everything. They are not in education,
Not in
not in
employment.
employment and not in training. Where are they? They are actually passing through a hopelessness. They belong to OBC. They belong to SC/ST. They belong to subaltern Muslims. They belong to subaltern Christians also. Madigas. Most of the Madigas in the Bidadi district of Karnataka are converted Christians. Their position is worse than the Hindu SCs, Hindu Madigas in some places.
This anger, despite its class character, caste character, elite character, and all of that, is nevertheless anger. And anger which is also not illegitimate. The cause for which they are fighting is not, nobody is saying that it's an illegitimate cause, and therefore one only can cry over the fact that there is no, progressive force to receive this revolutionary spirit, to perhaps even guide it, to, forget the fact that they should have been actually been triggering something like this. But now that it has happened, sometimes, like in the case of Lenin also, right? He was somewhere out of the country when the revolution happened.
And then he always been there outside the country most of the time.
Yeah. And when it finally happened, he's like, oh, it happened. So now he has to rush back
I will give you the analogy. What happened during 70s? Naxalbari upsurge happened. How it reverberated in the elite colleges of Bombay, Delhi and Calcutta? It was actually because there was a movement going on in the field. People were brutally killed. And it actually posed a question to this class of the people who are actually well off. You might have read stories about that. But then when there is absence of the people's movement there, these people will only work for them. That is not a problem. I am not actually saying that there should not have been CJP.
No, of course.
CJP will happen. But what would be the future course of this CJP in the absence of grassroots level people's movement who are on the streets? That is the change that we are witnessing during the 70s and the same crisis, same kind of complete despondency, same kind of resentment, but there is a complete big absence of grassroots level class and oppressed caste movement in the grass.
And you see that as a common thing running through the South Asian neighborhood, because we saw that in Sri Lanka, Nepal and all that.
Not only South Asia.
No, but these uprisings that we've had in the recent...
Yeah, of course. Who are
which is that there is no mass movement in order to inform this uprising, which is...
There was a small connection. For example, when there is a dictatorial regime in Bangladesh, and that actually repressed even the urban slums.
Yeah.
And actually the garment factories. The whole Bangladesh economy is based on the garments. That garment factory thing is also completely suppressed. There is a section of the people who have a resentment. So there was that section of the people who actually participated in that, but actually led, articulated and participated and finally got the benefits. Because there was no structural agenda. What is your solution to garment economy? What is your substitute to that? We actually say because of the garment economy, the per capita income of Bangladesh actually exceeded the per capita income of India. That is a fact. In 2022, they were $2 more than India. But then that cannot actually perpetuate for a long time if it is completely dependent on the export economy. If America collapses, Bangladesh collapses. Then there will be more suicide. They will be going 100 years backward than what it is today. What is the structural solution to that? Structural solution is it should be inward, basically catering to the grassroots level people. Instead of building big satellites, you see how the arid economic area zones of agriculture can be producing more tomatoes for that matter.
And yet I feel a little excited about these developments because it is again and again a reminder to, progressive politicians and activists that the conditions are still ripe. the conditions are ripe for a revolution. These people coming out in these numbers against these things.
When it was not ripe, tell me. When it was not ripe.
I think the 90s were the worst, no?
See, 90s is also you saw the upsurge, for example, the whole Mondal upsurge. Mondal against Kamandal came up as an upsurge of the OBC middle class people who were never on the streets. There has always been an opportunity, provided that you understand the dynamics of the particular era and actually devise your own strategy, tactics, program, mobilize people. First of all, go to the people. I myself, at least basing in Karnataka, I find we are in a comfort zone. All the movements are in a kind of comfort zone. Because compare any movement, I'm not talking about one particular movement. Take, for example, farmers movement, labor movement, or the students movement. They all have become the movement to articulate the middle class of that section. Dalits, farmers, labor. Where are the people? Where are that grassroots movement in the unorganized sector? Where are the grassroots movement of the students who are from the most oppressed sections of the people? Where are the movement for the landless peasantry?
And you're saying all of these things at a time when we are seeing a massive grassroots movement having died. Right, and that's actually my next section, really. The Maoist party's collapse. Right.
Die and collapse, I don't use that word because death is something the complete end. You can't actually say the end of anything for that matter as an end because a political project survives in different forms. The very genesis of a political project is in ideas. It's not in the material way. So likewise...
Then it's a collapse of a certain set of ideas implemented a certain way, right?
Yes, certain way, that's way. That particular way of appraisal that has been proved not impossible at least for some time to come. That is correct.
And there are some things I want you to respond to. Of course, I will want your analysis of the party as a whole, its project as a whole, the CPI Maoist. But in its last days, when the military operations were going on, I had two interesting guests who came over here. Professor Hargopal and Digri Prasad Chauhan. And Digri Prasad is a human rights activist who also happens to be a Dalit Ambedkarite. He comes from that kind of background. Works along with Soni Sori, Manish Kunjam, all these people. And Hargopal comes from this entire Bela Bhatia, Nandini Sundar, that structure. And one of the things which really stood out for me was this stark contradictions that were emerging of the Maoist party, wherein Manish, Soni, Digri were saying that the civil society people from Delhi and Hyderabad are doing, every time if you notice there's a trend, whenever the top leadership is in danger, then they will have their press conferences in Delhi and Hyderabad. The cadres have been dying for so many years, they don't. Now the leadership is in danger, so they come back again and hold these press conferences. There's a very sharp line of criticism, but somehow there is some empirical truth also to that. So firstly, the civil society response, Shivasundar, at that time, it was very, when they were talking about ceasefire and things like that, Manish Kunjam was saying, we have given them so many options. So many times I have gone to them, asked them to lay down arms and all that. That time they were saying, we'll fight till the last man. Now when they're actually facing the prospect of, going down to the last man, their nominees in the civil society world have come in there talking about peace. And now the Maoists also made a very strange position, right? Saying that we have seized fire, which means we're only doing defensive action now. We are not doing offensive action, which seemed very dishonest or hypocritical, no?
I think I should answer it in different levels.
Sure.
Taking some time also.
Of course, please.
Yeah. Beginning with that particular civil society thing, I think there is a lot of discussion. I have actually watched both the interviews. Manish Kunjam and also Digri Prasad and also Hargopal. Hargopal was 2 episodes, I think.
No, 1 episode only. There was a reflections episode that I had done. Yeah.
So I have gone through that and I mostly agree with most of the actually arguments that was placed in the way. In fact, I have always said that, in fact, I putting it in terms of what Balgopal said. You know Balgopal?
Of course.
Balgopal.
He was one of the main people we discussed in those 2 episodes actually.
In fact, Balgopal used to say, you have to revolutionize the democratic movement and democratize the revolutionary movement. I always actually find many meanings and newer meanings to you in what he said. And he actually continuously propagated that. But if you see the whole history of APCLC, right from 70s to till now. Now their work is reduced. Whether they have actually only fought on the leaders' issues, that is not the case. In fact, APCLC has fought for ordinary, the word ordinary is not correct. The activist,
Cadres.
the lowest activist to the highest leader, they have always took up the issue. And Balgopal has the great credit of bringing up the issue of how there are other forms of oppression, not just state. You have family, you have class, caste, which are all part of the human right discourse. And all these structures, whenever that is violated, you have to intervene. That is a question of human rights. That was, now it looks like what is big in that, but that was the days during 80s. He made that in with it was a very emphatic kind of giving a path breaking kind of thing. Some of the APCLC imbibed, some they did not, and finally HRF came up, and HRF is also, it is in a difficult way nowadays. Of course, if you, the larger question of why Maoist movement had to face this kind of collapse or decline, whatever you say. I think that was inbuilt into the kind of strategy that they actually pursued, even after the path-breaking changes that actually set in the economy and polity and society. For example, this whole Maoist kind of understanding of revolution actually imports its strategy from the Chinese, pre-revolution China, which was actually completely feudal. You had a kind of classical feudalism in China. One of the epithet was that the revolution in China will face armored counter-revolution from the beginning. Armored revolution will have to face the armored counter-revolution because you had armies of the feudal landlords, and if you have to build the movement, you also have to have your own army. Without having your army right from the very beginning, you cannot actually build the revolutionary movement, was the conditions pertaining to pre-revolution China, and that's how Mao actually successful in building movement also. So coming to post-independent India, there were pockets of India where it resembled pre-revolution China, and there was no democracy, no democratic institutions working. Instead of police, it was private armies. Like, for example, Middle Bihar or the Northern Bihar or the Telangana, Andhra Pradesh, Chhattisgarh. These are the areas, very backward areas. So there, the typical way of memorandum and these kind of thing did not actually yield. Finally, now there are many actually studies which says that because of the Naxal movement, feudal barriers broke, which gave way to democratic options. People, in fact, Dalits, could vote only because feudal regime collapsed. Democratic right was there. They were unable to exercise it. Exercising the democratic option was provided by the Naxalite movement. That is the link it had. But then after that, what? After that, you have to actually develop, you have to move forward. Feudalism is collapsing. Feudalism is not the main enemy. Then the larger question in the political regime was that which is the principal contradiction of the Indian continent? Who is the main enemy? Whether it is feudalism, Indian state, capitalism, what is that? And if you say capitalism, as Balgopal says, it is thousand-headed hydra. In a village, you can find out, you can actually identify a landlord who is an enemy. How can you personify capitalism? So fighting capitalism is a different way. You cannot fight capitalism as the way you fight the feudalism. So it so happened the Naxal movement was very successful in the very backward feudal areas. In the relatively developed areas, this particular program or the strategy did not work. So it emerged as a bigger question in the early 90s itself. Within Andhra Pradesh, you had developed pockets of Andhra Pradesh, for example, coastal area, where you cannot find feudalism. It was strong in Telangana. It was strong in the border areas of Chhattisgarh. They were failing continuously in Rayalaseema and Andhra Pradesh. So when this question was posed, that should have been taken as a political question of understanding the changing reality, the political economy of the Indian society. But then there is always this threat. If you actually get into this kind of polemic, those people who took this route have completely collapsed, completely compromised. They became enemies of the revolution. So there was a kind of phobia that if you take this question, you will be actually betraying the revolution for a long time. So that's why they actually made some amendments within the basic structure of principal enemy as feudalism. So that if you depend whole your program on identifying a non-existing principal enemy and you are fighting against that. For example, even in Karnataka, for example, they wanted to actually build a strong revolutionary movement in the pockets of forest areas. Forests are the most backward area. But the Karnataka forest is not the Dandakaranya forest. So Karnataka forest, you have some tribal pockets which are actually, they're well, when you compare to Dandakaranya tribals, they are far ahead socially, politically, infrastructure level. For example, in Shumaga or for example, Chikmagalur, these areas, every 5 minutes you have a private bus actually playing into the remote corner of the village. Unlike Dandakaranya, where you will not find even road, you can actually play your squads. Actually, without the threat of the police, you can go organize people, mobilize. Here you can't. But they actually practiced the same Dandakaranya method in Karnataka. By 2002 onwards, there was a lot of encounters. Even Saket Rajan became a martyr. Then it became a polemical question. Then we have to revisit our understanding of what is the Indian political economic reality. What are the big changes that has brought in, that has set in the political economy? Who is the enemy? Which class is the enemy? And if identifying that class, how to build the movement, a revolutionary movement against it. This question was not actually posed to that, and this strategy had to actually come to a deadlock. Either you continue with that in the most backward pockets. For example, Chhattisgarh is there is a place called Abujmal Forest. Abujmal Forest is the most backward even today. At least in the last year there was a road. There was no officer. Still last year, absolutely backward areas.
They just built roads. That's what,
That is only because they wanted to actually play the military
exactly.
vehicles there, and now they want to actually give it out to Ambanis and Adanis to actually take out the, I don't know, whatever.
Yeah, but building roads was part of the military strategy of defeating
Basically, it was military strategy. Now it is being used by the Ambanis and Adanis. So there is a inherent flaw of the Maoist understanding of the Indian society post 90s, and their strategy that they wanted to continue stubborn because of the phobia they had, that actually led to this. And in the most backward areas, finally, where the final collapse came, even according to Amit Shah, Chhattisgarh is the biggest threat. And Chhattisgarh, they won. Chhattisgarh, why? Because the very, very backward area, hardly there are any infrastructure. That's why the last pockets continued. And it also so happened, now you come to the sociology of the Revolutionary Party. These complex realities, if you want to understand, it needs a kind of a caliber, an understanding. When I say caliber, I am not talking about the intellectual capacity. It needs an exposure. It's this an exposure to different kind of economies that's working. To have a totality of the Indian economy, you need to know service sector. You need to know artificial intelligence. Unless otherwise, you cannot build a strategy to that. It so happens that there is a big gap in that exposure. And given these underground structures, exposure itself is a very, very, very problematic kind of, it is a life and death question. So that also brought in political backwardness into the party.
Political backward. This is such an interesting way you look at it. The political backwardness, which means you're saying they couldn't update.
That's what backwardness. Updating is forward.
And updating, when you talk about Marxists, updating is the absolute survival technique. Is the actual,
exactly,
the north star of your intellectual project is updation.
That's the problem.
Because dialectical materialism all about
100%.
Yeah.
That became a big problem. So how to break the problem? To me, it is a unsolved question. It breeds in a kind of Brahmanism, according to me. So it so happens, whoever is the articulate, whoever is exposed to kind of this formal education and exposure, when you articulate the new realities, you become the natural reader, and you don't have the grassroots level experience. So it brings in a kind of Brahminical dichotomy. I don't have an immediate answer to this, but this is the larger sociological and political dilemma that the Maoist party had. And even if it has to research itself, it has to resolve this. I don't think it is decimated, because even today, India is living in 3 different eras. You have people living in the old centuries. You are having the people living in the AI world. You are having the people living in the AI world. So there is a scope for all kind of polity. There is a scope for Maoist polity also. Whether they bring in revolution, mobilizing all kinds of people, is a question that has already been answered, that it is not possible in the way that they are looking at the present situation in this world. But Are there the counter question would be this: whether this democratic polity has it resolved the questions that the Naxalists have been raising in the Adivasi field? They're not doing that.
That is another way of looking at the
They're not resolved. So democracy has failed. Maoism has failed. Finally, that is the fail. We have this history of failures, but only one thing: failure is impregnated with lessons. Success has only small lessons. So we have to learn lessons. When I say democracy is failed as a project of emancipation, according to me, socialism is a precursor and a prerequisite for Indian socialism. That's what even Ambedkar said. Social democracy is a prerequisite for Indian communism. So that prerequisite, how are we going to fulfill it? Without that prerequisite, without that democratization of the party, of the structures, of the society, so socialism and revolution will be difficult to achieve. So this is a larger question. I don't think it is only Maoist question. It is a question of Indian revolution, according to me.
Anyway, that is something we can talk for another half an hour about. But I think we should leave one segment for the place we are from, where we are. Nama karma bhumi, nama janma bhumi, nama Kannada bhumi, right? And at least, if not Kannada bhumi, at least the South.
Yeah, sure.
Right, and in the South, for me, the Congress being the hegemon in the South, 3 state governments and 1 in coalition. Right. I mean, Congress is one of your favorite parties.
You know, people say that.
Yeah. You know, like when certain some of these scary bowlers will have some particular batsmen, who they keep getting. So Congress is your bunny in that sense. So, but then look at what the party is up to now, right? In each of these states where they are in power, there have been social conditions which has pushed the Congress into power. Perhaps not as much in Kerala. We can talk about it as a slightly different example. But in Telangana and in Karnataka, there were so many social movements which brought the party to power. And finally, the balance has been restored. Right? A Chakravarti has been appointed as the chief minister in each of those states. A Gowda and a Reddy. Also, in Kerala, we have Satisha, Vadaseri, Damodaran, Menon, Satishan.
Wow.
The person who took oath as the
You
chief
remember
minister.
the full name?
No, I wrote it down. I don't remember it. I wrote it down. Right, and this, why did I take it down? Because I remember when he took oath, he was very particular about mentioning that he's a Menon, that he's a Nair. So now you have a Nair, a Reddy, and a Vokaliga chief minister. Let's start from there, no? Let's break it down from there.
See, what does the history of Congress suggest to you? Right from the independence, it has been the party of the feudal lords. It has been the party of the upper caste. And the clientele and the people who vote to them were actually people from the downtrodden. But the leadership and the party discourse was actually framed by the feudal lords. First break came in the form of Indira Gandhi, in the form of indicate and syndicate kind of thing. Because Indira Gandhi wanted to emerge as a new leader with a new social composition, she talked about Garibi Hatao. She talked about OBC, Dalits, emancipation, 20-point program, everything came in 1969 so that she could build a different party. Because the erstwhile, in Karnataka, it was Samstha Congress. Samstha Congress and Indira Congress. Samstha Congress continued to be the feudal hold. And this new Congress...
Nijaligappa and...
the whole that Virendra Patil, all these people. And the new Congress had to find a new articulation and a new discourse and a new constituency. That's why they actually came out with these slogans. Of course, even the Indian capitalist class wanted a different kind of capitalist regime, some reforms. For example, bank nationalization. It didn't help the rural people, it helped the private capital, because the whole mobilization of the big funds were only used to Tatas and Birlas as a funds to actually finance them. So after that, if you come to Karnataka, in fact, it is only in 1972 and 79, there were more OBCs and Dalits than the upper caste and the dominant caste. Only during Devaraj Arasu regime. After 72 and 79, the equilibrium has always been the way you are suggesting. It has always been preponderance of the dominant caste and the upper caste. And OBCs, whoever were the leaders, they could have become CM. But by becoming CM, you are actually managing the same old order. You are not changing it. At the best, as Siddaramaiah did, Kurba caste could have become another dominant caste. The whole actually accusation against Siddaramaiah is that he only promoted Kurbas to actually compete another Okkaliga caste. It didn't actually change the regime of OBCs. It has been that. Yeah. In fact, that was very much very cunningly maneuvered by the Devegowda during 2024 election, saying that anti-Siddaramaiah, anti-Kurba feelings were actually mobilized among all the OBCs. Non-Kurubas actually voted in a big way in South Karnataka to JDS and BJP. It is because the anti-Kuruba feelings were nurtured. There was a material actually reality also. There was through omissions and commissions, Siddaramaiah contributed to that. Nevertheless, dominant caste used that to bring to come to the power. So that has been Congress party. I don't think there is a big shock or big anything. In fact, if you see the number of chief ministers and their caste background, or actually what kind of politics did they actually did? You had Siddaramaiah, a OBC, as a chief minister for 8 years, 8.5 years. So what big OBC thing he did in this whole regime?
You tell me.
Nothing. That's what I have been writing. For example, of course, he tried, to his credit. He wanted to bring that, what is that report? What is that report called?
But did he, socioeconomic caste survey?
Caste survey, he did that, and there was actually amendment.
Did he really want to bring it?
No, there was an amendment to law. In fact, there was a case in the court whether this survey can be done at all. But then he amended a law, actually initiated that. That was the heydays. He was actually enjoying his power. But once he was made into his size through other dominant castes, he did not take on them, finally. So that has been why, because OBC, sociologically speaking, it is not a cohesive class or a caste. Unlike Dalits, for example. Now, Dalit is also divided lot, that's for a different matter. But unlike Muslims, for example, there is a cohesion because of other things, there is internal dynamics also. But OBCs, for example, in Karnataka, there are 250 castes. Category 1, Category 2, Category 1, Category 2A, and even Okkaligas. So it comes to around 200 castes. Yeah, around 200 castes. And how many of them will be in each village? Only minimally they will be there. It will be dominated by the dominant caste. To mobilize them, you need a common enemy. Common, actually, if not an enemy, an ideal. Narayan Guru did that in a different way, socially. And politically also to do that. For example, Devraj Aras wanted to actually blend it. He did not actually came from as an intuition, but that was a time which he did that. There is no such vision among the OBC class. That's why OBC intellectuals who are progressive always say that we need an Ambedkar. Muslims need an Ambedkar, OBCs need an Ambedkar, so that they become a cohesive political force. When they are not a cohesive political force, and there is no attempt to do that, Ahinda is a electoral coalition at the best. And there is no internal cohesive force also to do that. I think that is bound to happen, and that's why Congress cannot bring any fundamental change in the caste arena or the class arena, politically speaking. So, my larger question is why Congress was voted to power in 2023, or why the Indian people, some sections want Congress to be in power. They think that at least they will take on BJP, they will take on RSS, they will take on the Indian fascism. So, which Siddaramaiah proved very wrongly in the last 2.5 years that he actually wrote. So, not only here, never in the last 10 years, or even when they were in power here in UPA, they were in power for 2004 to 2014. The whole SIR, the whole crisis that we were facing, it has its genesis in the act that was passed during Vajpayee in 2002. That is Citizenship Amendment Act. And you were in power between 2004 and 2014. What did you do? And what about CAA? It is a act based on religion which Constitution does not permit. But who then amended the visa class in 2009? It was UPA, which said that if a person who comes from Bangladesh, Afghanistan and Pakistan stays beyond the visa period, if he is a Muslim, he will be fined 5,000 rupees. If he is a non-Muslim, he will be fined 500 rupees. Religion-based discrimination was actually introduced in 2009 itself. And UAPA
was Tharoor the ME that time?
I don't remember. I mean Congress as a class.
Yeah, no, I'm just kind of trying to.
You had Manmohan Singh, you had Sonia Gandhi, you had Rahul Gandhi.
Yeah.
You had everyone there. No, I am not trying to say that BJP and Congress are one and same. I am just trying to say that there is no big difference.
No, but that's the thing. No, so in these southern states, there has been so much progressive political churning, and it finally comes down to this, Sandre. There is something to be worried about, right? Because let's take just the Karnataka example, right? At that time when he was getting, almost, it was certain that D.K. Shivkumar is going to become the chief minister. There was this talk of there needs to be a Dalit deputy chief minister, right? And the 3-4 people were in the fray. And I called one of them to ask, so what's happening and all of that. I believe your name is doing the rounds. And he said, imagination is limited. No, why can't I be a chief minister? Your imagination as a journalist is limited. Both of us laughed and all that, but both of us laughed because he also knows why he can't be the chief minister. Right. So that politics, Shivasundar, in Karnataka's context, we have a couple of things here to look at, refer to. Those conditions do you ever see emerging in Karnataka?
It will. It should. How?
It should is something we can all agree upon.
There was a circumstance. How did Devaraj emerge? How did Devaraj was compelled to come up with land reforms? I will give you the history. We always attribute the very progressive land reforms to Devaraj. But what happened during 1972? Huchmaste Gowda was the revenue minister. Prior to Huchmaste Gowda, B.D. Jatti during 1961, he brought in the Land Reforms Act. And what was the upper land ceiling? You will be astonished. 436 acres was the upper land ceiling.
You spoke about last time, yeah.
Then it was reduced during Huchmaste Gowda to 235 acres. It is a kind of legitimizing the feudal hold over that. Then how it was changed? It was because of the protest within the assembly and outside it. Within the assembly, there were 3 communist MLAs and 3 socialist MLAs.
Including Kakilaya and all.
Kakilaya, B.V. Kakilaya, the father of the great doctor there, B.V. Kakilaya, and you have V.B. Patil, I think. Then you had M.S. Krishnan.
Bangarappa and all.
Then you had Bangarappa, Konandur Lingappa, and Kagod Temappa. They fought from within, and there was a huge movement on the streets, workers and farmers. B.V. Kakilaya mobilized in Bantwala, thousands of people there. All those Bilabas who are the foot soldiers of RSS today, they were actually the members of communist parties, then socialist parties. In the first 5 elections, from Sulya to Ullal, it was communists. Communists. From Ullal to, say, Ankola, it was socialists. There was a party by name MKSS. For the first 3 elections, 52, 57 and 62, that was how the Dakshin Kannada politics used to play. And you had this BDUs and you have all these people. They were
Tile workers.
That was the ground swelling for the people's politics. Till 1989, you had that kind of reverberance. And this reflected within the assembly also. And that's why a new structure was formed for land reform. There was a kind of committee which was actually manned by both the people, leaders of the people's movement and the MLAs. And these committees were actually given charge of deciding upon the claims. 88% of the claims made by the landless or the tenants in Dakshin Kannada was actually decreed in favor of the tenants. That is because of the intervention of the movement. It happened. India, Karnataka has that history from within and without.
So now,
what happened then? What happened then was that grassroots level movement was actually collapsing. In fact, those leaders, if you see the history of the leaders, say for example, what happened in 70s, you had this farmers movement, you had Dalit movement. Understand the history of this Dalit and farmers movement. How did they actually build the movement? The example of Dalit leaders is actually illuminating and is always inspiring, no matter what they have become today, many of them. But how they built the movement, that is an example that we have to follow even today. They went without any protection to each and every village. They used to stay in the villages. They used to mobilize people. Dalit was a kind of name to include all the oppressed. And what was the biggest Dalit movement during 1978? It was a movement against atrocity committed against a Kumbar woman in Kolar, Anusuyamma. And against that, Wakkaliga progressives, Lingayat progressives, Dalits, everyone actually mobilized in a big way. And how did that happen? That happened because that was the milieu there, and people actually went to the people, stayed with them. That was the kind of activism of subaltern activism. And whenever there used to be a big movement, a mobilization of the people to Bangalore, people used to travel ticketless. I don't know if you have traveled. In my student days in activist, we used to travel ticketless. If we were caught, we were actually spending one day or one night in the prison, and we used to travel again ticketless. That was because we didn't have money. Then there was one Tulsi Tota. Now it is a metro station in near Majestic, that Kaveri house. We used to stay there. People, not me, in the sense, people used to come there, have half chitrana, half tea, and mobilize without chappals to Vidhan Sauda. Gherav them. There was that militancy, commitment, and that's how people were mobilized. People had a kind of confidence on the leadership. Slowly, by 83, there is a story. Ramakrishna Hegde came to power in 1985. He actually threw open the provisions of co-opting them. Slowly, we thought the state is a friend of us. So ideologically, politically, that has changed now. State has a class character, state has a caste character, and state cannot be friend of the oppressed people. That is the minimum understanding of the revolutionary progressive movement during the 70s and 80s. But after Siddaramaiah coming to power, the whole, whether it is Marxists, liberals, everyone, now state is a friend. Whether it is even DK Shivkumar.
No, but DK Shivkumar is the scariest of all these developments that we have seen.
People are happy with DK Shivkumar.
Who?
See, for example, for SIR, now he has actually declared that there will be a permanent residence certificate, which has a lot of flaws. I have written it today about it, because that will not be accepted by the election commission. It is the competent authority should be Tahsildar, and in West Bengal they have already said that they will not even accept domicile certificate. When there was a big movement on the streets by Mamata Banerjee, finally they accepted with 4 conditions. There should be competent authority, there should be a process that is followed, and that should be according to an act passed in 1999, not the new laws that Mamata Banerjee wanted to introduce. Now there is a new rules that is introduced by DK Shivkumar, which says that even oral evidence is suffice to give permanent residence. And why at all this permanent residence is made a condition instead of residence certificate? They want to see that you are citizen. This is citizenship verification, right? So that will not be accepted. But since he is doing something, DK Shivkumar is also considered as, okay man, but you know what he is doing in Bidadi? You know what he did yesterday? That minimum wage revision. So it has been actually withdrawn because the industrialists and the many business people, they are against it. They cannot actually pay that, and that is the grouse they have. Now on the alibi of that, it was not actually approved by the cabinet. Now it has been withdrawn for the revision. And in Devanhalli, we had so much about Devanhalli. Now those people who want to surrender their land voluntarily, this place is increased to December, and minimum price that they would be given is 2.7 crores. Already 520 acres has been actually identified. So there is a premature celebration. And or for example, this internal reservation. What kind of betrayal it is? The whole, according to Nagmohan Das committee report, the 5 lakh Dalit nomads, they belong to most backward. There was 4 categories: most backward, more backward, backward, and relatively developed. They belong to the most backward. Lambanis, Bovis, Korma, Korchas were considered as relatively developed than these 3 things. This group has been actually added to the most developed. What happened to Baba Budan Dargah? We were promised that there will be no Archak.
But that to Siddaramaiah was in power.
All these things is Siddaramaiah. Whatever name, I mean, examples I have been giving, except this Bidadi and the other thing, is all during Siddaramaiah. Siddaramaiah means it is the whole cabinet, including DK Shivkumar. He could not. What happened to that Kantaraj committee report? Why it was actually why the drama of accepting Hegde report? Why the new drama of that new report a day before he resigned? It will not be accepted in the court of law because you have a census. This survey, upper caste people did not participate. Already they have filed a case in the court saying that it cannot be a survey that should be accepted, knowing fully well. And you have Naxalites who are surrendered. They are still languishing in jail. But compare that with Telangana and Chhattisgarh. Those who surrendered, they are not in jail.
No, but I'm just saying that there is something of a break with the emergence of a DK Shivkumar from the past. because I feel like this is a person who's unapologetically apolitical. Not apolitical, but he's non-ideological.
He's a congressman.
So there are so many people who can be called a
No.
congressman, but
When I say congressman, I say it with some particular kind of.
no, that is as far as the party is concerned. But saying that okay, he's a congressman, his loyalty matters and all that. But from the public point of view, he is not somebody who presents any ideological alternative. Neither is that Revanth Reddy character, and both of them have these. Some kind of umbilical connection with the RSS and these sympathies and all of these things.
Exactly.
This has never been the feature of a Vokalega leader in the past in Karnataka, or has it? SM Krishna comes on the back of this, oh, I'm, foreign educated, IT, modern. Deve Gowda is coming with some kind of, at least there's a trope. There's a trope that you can poke holes into that trope and that narrative. But nevertheless, there's a pretense at some decency, some kind of a, saying that I am here for a higher ideal. Whereas this man comes and he's not laying claim to any higher ideal. Neither is that Revanth Reddy character.
Who said Hydra? Hitler's Hydra is my actually.
Yeah.
And he says Namaste Sadavasana.
There is absolutely no pretense. See, I still feel that pretense shows that there is some need to kind of,
there you are. Actually, that's the point. That's the where I wanted to actually drive also. I have a theory. Always we actually compare Vajpayee with Advani, Advani with Modi, Modi with Yogi. So we think it was better. My point is this. Every era, they can only do a particular thing in a way that they can do. For example, you will be amazed to know in 1969 election manifesto, Bharatiya Janasangh manifesto actually mimicked Communist Party. They said that only 4 slabs of salary should be given in the industry. Why? Because that was the Yuga Dharma of 1969. You could not imagine, there could not have been a Modi in 1969. Modi could have emerged only in a social, economic, political milieu of 2002. And a yogi could emerge and succeed if we don't know what. And a worse person than yogi may also come in the coming days. So this is the era in which pretensions are not required. Siddaramaiah also did not pretend in the second tenure, according to me. He was open because this era will actually can take that. So there is a saying, no, every country gets the fascist it deserves. So every era gets the fascist that it deserves. So this is the era where people's movement are so weak. See, always Doraiswamy used to say that when only there are lakhs and lakhs of people on the street, even a fascist government will have to actually answer to them. When you don't have that, and he used to actually propagate a kind of a moral citizenship. He never wanted to go and bow before the chief minister. He would not be happy if a chief minister holds his hand. Now, it so happens that we actually arrange our movements in such a way that a minister will come to our Freedom Park and receives our memorandum, and that is our victory. And prior to that, we would have a lot of bargaining with him to come. We should compel him to come. That is the people's protest. For example, in 1986, I don't know whether you remember this, there was one K. Sharma who used to mobilize unorganized workers. 50,000 workers actually geraved Vidhan Saudha in its fullest sense. There was no business in Vidhan Saudha, 50,000. That was the last time when actually there was a real Vidhan Saudha chalo. And after that, there was this 133, section 33, section 144 that was actually imposed on them. So I find a link between the lack of people's mobilization, lack of that idea, lack of that material representation of that protest on the street, and the kind of no need of pretense. There is a link to that.
Okay, then we leave this part and get into this last segment now, where I want to just talk about this land acquisition Bidadi.
Yeah.
I saw a few interesting social realities over there, but your take on the Bidadi question, Shivasundar. Bidadi, and of course, Devanahalli also happened recently.
Yeah.
What is your reading of the ground?
See, there are 2 factors. The farmer movements always had this dichotomy. In fact, there used to be a landless movement, landless farmers movement. There used to be farmers movement. Post 90s, whatever has been in the fray in the name of farmers movement, even Asadi makes this point, Professor Asadi makes it point very clear. It is a new people's movement, but serving the middle class of the farmers. That's why market, remuneration, MSP, these are the issues. They are the real issues. Here the perpetrator and the enemy is the corporate class, and they are exploited. But in this whole bargain, the question of the landless actually does not come into the forefront. Even in the farmers' movement in Delhi, for example, in 2020, it was BKU Ugrahan who maintained that this issue should be brought into the forefront, and also we should help the farmers to fight for this MSP. There was that clarity among the farmers movement. But because of the lack of landless movement in Karnataka, historically speaking, farmers movement have sympathetically addressed the landless, but essentially it has been a movement against the corporate class, against the state. In the given political economic milieu, where corporate class is the biggest beneficiary of this whole regime, this movement is also progressive. But then there is a dichotomy. For example, as I study and find it, agriculture is not a big incentive for the youth, rural youth today. They want to actually go away. But after COVID, people are finding that at least you have a piece of land, you can go back, because these cities can always throw you out. And there is also that problem. City is not actually generating jobs. And earlier, in the first 2 decades of the 90s, whatever it promised, that's not happening. That's why a small interest again to go back to the land is emerging, but it is not predominant even today. So the question of land still remains. Land as a sustenance, to retain land as a sustenance. And whenever there is a occupation of land for the big corporate lobbies, first 10 years, the families would see the affluence. For example, in the very same Bidadi area, during 1999, there was this nice project, no?
Toyota and Coca-Cola,
Toyota, when it came up in 96.
Coca-Cola on plant is also there.
Coca-Cola is a smaller project, Bidadi was a big project, and for every acre of land during 1996, they used to pay 6 lakh. That was a huge sum in 1996. And in 1999, when this BMIC project came up, Ashok Kenny and others, as an activist, we used to go to villages and mobilize people against that project. And in some 1 or 2 villages, we found a lot of resistance, because they say that they will pay us more than 7 lakh rupees. Who are you to come and disturb us? But then NICE actually occupied the land. Since then, they cannot develop their land, and their land is not completely acquired also. This has given a concrete experience of how corporate will betray them. So that's why even a small landholder, for example, in the Bidadi area, including the small landholders who have 1 acre and 2.5 acres, they are not happy even with 2.5 crore rupees. They say that once a 2.5 crore rupees is given to them, family crisis will erupt. And the distribution of the money is a big problem, and they will again become the P1 in the or some kind of job holder in the urban villages. So there is a big movement. The question is, what is this Bidadi project, Anekal project, Devnalli project is part of? It's a grand design of making Karnataka a $1 trillion economy, where Bangalore will be the driving force. With Bangalore Business District, Bangalore AI Surgeon Township, and that BBD area, and that's why you have that newly inaugurated Mysore Magadi Road, etc. That whole area. So, day before yesterday, there was a big meeting of the cabinet subcommittee, along with Shalini Rajneesh, who happens to be the CS. They say that in the next 10 years, they want to invest 35 lakh crore rupees to Bangalore area and convert Bangalore into a kind of a dream city, both for tourism, both for retirement, and both for AI cities. And when I say AI cities, you might know what happened in Visakhapatnam. They are coming with that AI Google city, where they need 1 trillion liter of water every day, continuous supply, and not even a second collapse of electricity. So most of the electricity and most of the water in the areas where AI cities are going to come up, farmers will lose everything. And will they be employed there? They cannot be. For example, Foxconn. Foxconn is a chip factory where Karnataka government has given 7,500 crore rupees of subsidy, capital subsidy. They are producing only 10,000 jobs, that too skilled jobs. Local people are not getting anything. So even if you go through cost benefit analysis, 40 to 50% of the downtrodden subaltern Bangaloreans will lose it, including the landless, including the small farmers. And who will benefit? It is only the top 10% of the class who will get the first class city benefits, and rest of the people will be the slums. What happened day before yesterday, even to the street vendors? They are now empowered with the Supreme Court order saying that free street is your fundamental right. And today, Peregoda has said it very clearly, only in the arterial roads, there will be vendors, there will be no vendors in the main roads. So you are reconstructing a new Bangalore. And you want to actually repeat this kind of model in some parts of Gulbarga and Belgaum also. MB Patil is trying to say that even in Belgaum, you will have some aerospace industry. For every aerospace industry, you will have 1,000 Devanandis. So is it the model? That comes to the mode of production, that comes to the mode of development also. So 40 to 50% of the people, downtrodden people, which is inclusive of in different sectors. So they will be losing it out, and that is very problematic. So this land acquisition is not just about land. It is the question of what kind of development, what kind of Bangalore, what kind of Karnataka, and what will be our future in that Karnataka. That is all destined now.
No, this is, of course, I mean, this is a very powerful, analysis of the situation, of course, in terms of how we are transforming beyond recognition. But in this, I found a very interesting voice, since you brought about the downtrodden and that entire question. When you look at the collapse of an old order and a very brutal system replacing it, but that brutal system is blind to the old order. It comes with a baggage of new kinds of economies, new kind of opportunities. And the reason I say this is because in the case of Mangalore SEZ back in the day, we were looking at how different castes and different communities were responding to the notification. Dalits over there had a very interesting take. And one of the things they were saying, of course, is that we are not even going to get compensation because we are landless. And, the question of compensation only comes in when you have land. Bidadi, of course, that one question came in, saying that there are very few Dalits over there who have land. And so therefore, for them, there is no compensation. But then there is loss of livelihood. How do you compensate that? That is one interesting dimension that emerged. The other thing was that these people are landless also because of a lethargy in the implementation of the state's policy and program, because there are Gomala lands over there on which there are lots of petitions under that Form 53, I think, no? It's called
53, 57. 34 lakh forms are actually pending. The petitions are pending.
And in those 3 villages, there are a few thousand such applications. But what will the government do every time it goes to acquire land? It sees Gomala land as its own land, saying government land. And government land in the eyes of the bureaucrat is government of Karnataka, not government of the people, right? Somehow as though these are two different things, right? It is because it is government land that poor Dalits are able to go and access that land, and without any contest, at least they're able to graze in those. Some places are even cultivated illegally, so to speak, right? All of that, suddenly the notification happens. The first places to be notified are the Gomala lands, which is actually Dalit claim land. So you've not done the redistribution yet, you have notified that. Then came this other section of people who are sharecroppers. There's a large absentee landlord. And I was sitting with a gentleman who was showing me some of these Instagram influencer videos where you have this, whatever, Gauda or Gaudati or whatever coming and saying, Idu namma sottu, nanu huttiro ooru, nan belidiro anta idu, all of that, nodi, it's so green, it is all of this and all that. Saying that, do you know this person doesn't live here? I know this person doesn't live here. This person lives in Bangalore, this person lives in Hyderabad or Delhi or whatever. But then they've come back, and they come back why? Because it's a farmhouse for them now, right? All of this, and saying that these are the people in whose lands we are actually sharecroppers. Silk, sericulture is a very big thing. Every month there is a revenue. They're saying, but when this acquisition happens, they're going to get the compensation, not us. So that's another category of Dalits over there. The third category, of course, is those few Dalits who have land.
Yeah.
There I discovered that not even one person has land. So these people are constantly talking about some water bodies, including a river in that place, in that notified area, saying that it'll all vanish and this water is what they're after and all that. And they said, which water? We have no access to water. They are describing it all the influencer videos that we are seeing today. The Bidadi so-called farmers, not so-called, I mean farmers only, let's call them. I mean, whatever, they are talking about how well irrigated it is. Whereas the Dalits are saying our farms don't have that kind of irrigation. We are far away. Most of our farms are dependent on bore wells. Most of our farms are also inaccessible. They are landlocked. There is no access roads. The value is very low. So they are excited about the prospect of getting the same rate as everybody else. 2.7 crore for this land. Take it. Nobody will never again like at this kind of price. Now these 3-4 phenomena you would have seen in different scenarios. This is not new. How do you?
Yeah, I have told you, we have actually witnessed this in 1999 when we actually went on mobilizing people against BMIC project. There are these sections of the people and these issues are very real and material. I'll give you some examples. The recent Karnataka statistics suggest there is 1 crore 11 lakh acres of land owned by Karnataka. 1 crore 11 lakh acres of land. And how many landless are there in Karnataka? How many petitions pending? 33 lakhs. So, it is not that there is dearth of land. There is not that government has to buy the land and give it to the Dalit farmers. There is own project. Even SASP, TSP, some amount is actually required that you can distribute the land.
And this is, you said this 11 crore.
1 crore 11 lakh.
1 crore 11 acres revenue land
owned by government.
Forest or revenue land?
Government revenue land. Revenue land in different names. There are some Gomala land. There is some not forest land. Forest land does not actually, they cannot even claim that it is government's land. That's not that apart. So land should be distributed, which has not been done. Whether it is Janata Dal, whether it is Congress government, they have not been doing that. Even today, the dignity of the Dalits will increase only by owning the land. Those who are landless, if you give the land, their dignity in their position in the land, position in the village, they will become landowner.
Actually, one gentleman who was leading the Devanali struggle spoke about this, and instantly there was a counter which said that, for me, when land is being devalued, to come and own that land is not a big deal, one. And secondly, consider that land redistribution is not going to happen. I know that for a fact. So here is for me an opportunity to break out of the feudal order also. Because they gave the reference of this Toyota and this Coca-Cola plant, saying that today this generation is working there and not at least in the farms.
But there is a slavery, the modern slavery.
Of course it is.
In fact,
but then you look at...
I'll explain that. In fact, it is not to say that we have to revert back to feudal order.
Yeah.
Feudalism should be destroyed. When you talk about modernity, yes, modernity has come as a response to feudal order. But you have capitalist modernity. You don't have a socialist modernity. Socialism in not the derogative sense of it. Socialism in the sense of giving equal dignity, equal share of power, and that kind of emancipatory modernity. So there is a different modernity. There is a different solution to the feudal order. So you have to actually emphasize on that. But what is this particular project giving to them? This is actually enhancing the slavery. That's what I am trying to say. If this project comes in within 10 years, where will be the street vendors? Where will be the landless people? Where will be the slums? There will be not even Tanisandra and Kovilo. They will be thrown out of 50 kilometers are there, So what is waiting for them, waiting for us, who lose the land, is not a better life. It is worst life. Not that we have a better life today. And the solution is what? Not to go from bad to the worse. We have to change this, bring the demands of the landless for the emancipatory living in the existing arena, and that should be part of the discourse. That's what I was trying to suggest, that farmers' movement did not articulate it. In Karnataka, the farmers' movement actually went on articulating remunerative prices, which is necessary. MSP, that is necessary. Their fight against state, which is very much needed. Their fight now, later part, it became against corporate class, that is also necessary. But then where is the emancipatory potential within this regime for the landless? That question was not posed. Without that, there was a new experiment in Karnataka called Sarvodaya, where landless Dalit movement and also farmers movements came together, but it did not further the cause of the landless. So what is required is to further the cause of the landless and to change this modernity discourse into a real equalitarian socialist kind of modernity and socialist kind of setup, which is a long course, which will not happen today, day after tomorrow. It is a minimum 20 to 30 years project of grassroots level mobilization, getting back to those days of mobilizing the people, which I told about how we used to travel ticketless, etc. Whatever, not to ticketless, but then that kind of activism should be reverted back to. But activism today is in a kind of some comfort zone. There should be some shock to that and get back to that. I think we are heading towards that.
The conditions are getting created on their
Conditions are creating. If you are not going to attend to that, you will be thrown into dustbins of the history. And those who can attend to that, they can create history. That is the juncture we are in.
At least that's the closest, I suppose, this time we have come to talking about some solutions. And this is, of course, the basic theory, which is that the conditions are there. And
exactly. You should understand when you say conditions, it is not in the generic sense. We have to understand it in the concrete sense. When you say capitalism, what is this capitalism? When you say crony capitalism, what is the nature of the crony capitalism? When you say the system, what is the kind of system? What is the architecture of it? How are the classes are exploited? So what is the source of exploitation? So where you have to intervene so that the exploiting class will be thrown into crisis and the exploited class is mobilized. This concrete analysis with intersectionality. When Marx said class, it was not economic class. That is one biggest kind of misunderstanding we have about Marx. Marx said social class, which is inclusive of non-economic oppressive categories also. Unless we reinvent that and re-articulate that and re-understand that in the present setup, I think new thing will not emerge. I think now situation is demanding not generic answers, concrete answers, concrete understanding. That's what even Lenin said, concrete understanding of concrete things.
Okay, we'll close on that note, Shivasundar. Thank you so much. Concrete solutions. And yes, before we go, the concrete solution to the problem of this newsroom, the studio, is the crunch in funds that we are always facing. You can solve that 500 rupees at a time. 500 rupees is a subscription we have, Shivasundar over here saying 500 a month for a year. You know, it's a lot. But do you see subscription as, this was one thing I wanted to ask you for a long time, because you're also a journalist. I mean, in independent media spaces now we are talking about the subscription model. Do you think that's the future?
I think that if you want to remain autonomous, independent, not just alternative, that is the only solution. If you depend upon parties, ruling class, elites, they will dictate terms. So those so-called alternate journalism who are dependent on that, I don't think they are doing real and independent autonomous journalism. That is the only way out. People should pay for what they receive. For the quality, they should give quantity. Also.
I said it, not Shivasundar.
Yeah.
This was What's Your ISM. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next episode. Thank you very much, Shivasundar.
Thank you, Sudipto.